I was born and raised in Alexandria, Louisiana. I come from a little country town called Elmer, Louisiana. It's a little country town that if you don't know where if you don't know where it's at, you don't know where you're going. You're just up creek. You have to know where you're going because the road signs are few and far between. I went to school in Tioga, which is now considered part of Pineville. And my daddy traveled around a lot on construction work. He was a superintendent, so we've lived in Lafayette, all over Louisiana, Monroe, Lafayette, Shreveport, different areas because he had to go where the work was. And so I grew up mainly in Pineville. And I was the youngest of 3 children. I was always a little tomboy. I was tough, Somebody wanted to go anywhere or play in the dirt. Back in the day when I was young, you played outside all day, every day. And you didn't come home till dark 30, and nobody had to worry about where the kids were. They basically knew. I was a happy child, very happy, outgoing. And we went to a little church called Clear Creek Methodist Church, back up in the woods in one of the camps. If you didn't know where you were going, you couldn't get there because the roads up in there, mainly the road that followed to the church, it ended at the church. And that's the church, too, I went to my whole life as a kid growing up, living in Pineville the majority of our life. That's all I remember is always going to church. And I was born and raised a Methodist, still to this day, I'm a Methodist. The little country church was our whole family, basically. Church was a big thing for us. We were always going and doing stuff. We had, when they said a dinner on the ground, it was literally dinner on the ground. We took the pews out of the church and we put them facing each other. The backs on the outside, the sitting part is on the inside. And you set the food on the pews and we lay out a big old blanket or whatever and we'd all pass down the row, and the food would be just for days, seemed like forever to me in a child's mind anyway. I loved it. It was a wonderful, homey, caring, loving family. And like I said, all the people were there. If the last name wasn't Duran, they were still kin to us some way or another. As the years went by, growing up there as a child, I started to get a little bit older and like I said, we were around family a lot most of the time. And I had an uncle that just really liked me a whole lot. And I had won several beauty contests, because I was just an outgoing kid. And he got closer and closer, and he molested me as a child. And he would always tell me, you can't say anything about this. You can't talk about this. Well, I've always been kind of straightforward my whole life. Well, being young like that, an adult tells you that you can't talk about something. Back in the day, when I was a child, I'm 75 now, so way back then, things were a lot different. You didn't talk about things like that. You didn't mention it. You think a lot of children are molested now, or women are molested now, or whatever the age may be. They talk about it more now than they ever did back then. It was a big, big no-no, So he would tell me, now, if you tell anybody, they're going to think you're a bad little girl, and they're going to be upset with you. When it started, he put this in my mind that if I tell anybody, I'm going to be the bad person here, that not my uncle is not going to affect him, it's going to affect me because it was my fault. Well, a child that's 7 or 8 years old and very vulnerable at that age, being just in school good and trying to, be part of a group of kids going to school, and other than your own family that you've been around your whole life, it plays with your head to the point that, okay, if I say anything, they are going to believe that it was my fault. So I convinced myself or basically he did, but I thought it was all my fault. So I would always ask myself, what have I done? What did I do? And I felt like, as a child, I felt like it was just written on my forehead. And I never really knew how to deal with it. And then the older I got, that thought in my head got worse. And I believed with all my heart that I was just not a decent human being at that point. And you convince yourself that you don't deserve any better when you get older, because you realize, that because you were told it was your fault, that was the case, so you're bad. So I felt like I didn't deserve anybody better because of what had happened. Well, about 20 years old, I met a man, and I was married to him for 21 years, and that's my children's daddy. Well, he was an alcoholic, and he was abusive. And, if he didn't get what he wanted when he wanted it, or supper wasn't ready for him on the table hot when he came in from drinking and partying all night or whatever with guys or whoever, he'd come in and it was my fault. So the fighting commenced, and I'd fight. I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't give in. I fought back. We separated a couple of times, but it never always went back, because he was a good father, good to my children, and they loved their daddy. But when my kids got older, I began to realize that, why am I living in a world where I'm not happy? I'm not happy with me more than anybody else because of who I thought I was, or had accepted the fact that that's who I thought I was. He came in one evening, and he started getting mad and was fixing to hit me, and I grabbed a gun on the table, and he was a policeman. I grabbed the gun on the table and I pulled the trigger, and it was empty. And I realized I had reached the point that I was ashamed of the way I had lived. I was ashamed of the way I had just felt like that I was just so unworthy of anything or anybody. And then when he did that, I snapped, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, I told him, I said, you ever lay a hand on me again, I will kill you. And when I said that, I realized I said, I'm capable of doing such a horrible thing. But I knew that I just couldn't live my life like that. I knew that I had finally broke. God has been with me my whole life. And I didn't realize it until I had reached that point, because when I did that, I knew I had to leave. I knew it was time for me to get out of this relationship. I was so shocked myself by what I was capable of doing. After that, I had planned on leaving and started making arrangements to leave, and all this time this was tearing me apart. I had felt so unworthy. But I know that God was with me, and I was strong, and I knew I was strong. But I said, why do I have to live like this? I don't have to. And I finally just called out to God. I said, God, I can't do this anymore. I can't. And I just slid down the wall crying, and when I did, I raised up my hands and said, God, I need you now more than anything else. I know you've been with me my whole life, but now I need you more. From that day forward, my life began to change. And I realized that God had been with me, and He stayed with me and protected me. I knew God was protecting me because I had known God my whole life. My whole life. That because of Him, that gun was empty. That was a God thing, and I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. I know it was a God thing because God protected me for what I went through, and I held my sanity. Now, why things happened to me when I was young, I'll never know the answer to that, because I don't know why, except that I can say, God, it's made me who I am. God was waiting for me to fully open up to Him, I guess, when I was older. And when I opened up to Him, and that day that I did what I did and said, God, I can't do this by myself, my life changed totally. But I was so much younger back then, I didn't know that all I had to do was reach out to God and He would be there. But He was there for me. Things happened, yes, that was beyond my control. And I never realized that until then. So I realized that I wasn't the bad person that everybody said I was. I never felt betrayed by God. I never cried out to God, why me? I never did. But the best thing I can say to anybody is, when you're down and you need somebody, just ask for God. Just give it to Him and let Him lead you. Let Him take you where your life's supposed to go.